Shounen is no stranger when it comes to having antagonists in groups within their series. Everything from Hunter x Hunter to One Piece features this idea, but some of the most prominent goon squads to have ever appeared have been the Akatsuki from Boruto's dad,
myself to sleep,
and the Disaster Curses from Discount Bleach. So then, who would win? Before this video begins, I'm going to do the cringe YouTube a bit and ask that you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Seriously, it's actually criminal how much of you guys are not subscribed. But back to the video. So, starting off with the Disaster Curse's Hanami, a forest curse capable of manipulating nature, was able to summon roots from the ground using her cursed energy. These roots then rose to blot out the sky, and when calculated, this comes out to be able to output around 28,656,232 tons of force, which is the same energy needed to destroy multiple city blocks. Keep in mind, however, that this was performed by her holding back Hanami that barely cared about those she was fighting, and was mostly using these roots as a means of transportation. Hanami then goes on to fight Yuji Itadori, the protagonist of Jujutsu Kaisen, and a sorcerer of incredibly accurate cursed energy control. Yuji was capable of damaging a stronger Hanami with his normal punches, and Hanami herself was able to withstand a black flash from Yuji. A black flash occurs when the cursed energy is applied in a specific time frame, and the power behind the black flash is to the power of 2.5, essentially the attack times itself. When calculated, this means Hanami was able to survive roughly 4.17 times 10 to the power of 28 joules of force, which comes out to roughly enough energy to destroy multiple continents. Hanami is able to hurt Yuji, who is able to output this much force, meaning she'd scale to it. This black flash scaling can get a little weird though, as here comes Hanami surviving these massive blows, but still takes damage from Yuji without black flash. Some in the JJK community would argue that Yuji's punches got stronger after performing the Black Flash, which is substantiated with his increased cursed energy control, and others would say that Black Flash doesn't actually increase the force of the blow itself, but how much cursed energy is being applied. There are pros and cons to both of these lines of reasoning, so I'll let you decide which of these is more accurate, if any. But at a conservative estimate, Hanami is capable of destroying multiple city blocks, and on the higher end is multi-continental. Jogo, Dagon, and Mahito, on the other hand, are much simpler to estimate how hard they can punch. Dagon, a Cthulhu-like curse that can control water and summon Shikigami, was able to create a large island using his domain expansion, a domain expansion being a technique which projects your mind onto reality and constructs a separate space/dimension in reality, building up everything inside with cursed energy. It should also be noted that there is a sun in Dagon's domain expansion. Dagon himself is much stronger than Hanami, so if you want to argue that Dagon is outputting enough energy to create suns, then you certainly can. However, Dagon isn't portrayed to be as strong as he is durable, so this sun may only be a visual effect and not an actual star. The volcano spirit Jogo is also stated to be on another level when compared to Dagon, and the fanbook details how Jogo's maximum meteor could reduce an entire town from corner to corner to ash. This technique that he would use to do this is called the maximum meteor. This same maximum meteor was thought by Jogo to be able to damage even Ryomen Sukuna, the king of curses, and someone who, even in early JJK, was stated to be capable of destroying the world as we know it. World in this case can mean a variety of things, and can mean anything from society all the way up to universe. Now, I highly doubt at this time the statement was aiming for a universal Sukuna, so the safest assumption would either be society or the planet. Sukuna does say, if it hit, response to Jogo exclaiming that it must have damaged him. However, Sukuna had also been shown through that entire fight to be mocking Jogo and sarcastically beating him down, only complimenting him after he kills him in a single attack. So it's very questionable if Sukuna was actually serious when he said this. But if you accept that maximum meteor can hurt Sukuna, and you also interpret Sukuna destroying the world as him destroying the planet, then Jogo is able to output enough power to blow up the planet like some kind of Dragon Ball antagonist. It's commonly agreed upon that Mahito is either stronger than Jogo or roughly on the same level as him. So I won't be talking too much about Mahito since he'd just be a better Jogo, especially given that Mahito is mostly a hack-based fighter, which we'll get to later. Answering our next question though of how fast these characters are is pretty simple. However, all the disaster curses are stronger than Maki Zenin, a jujutsu sorcerer who's weaker than Yuji. Maki was capable of reacting to bullets and dodging out of the way at point blank ranges, coming out to roughly hypersonic speeds. Some very rare people within the JJK community would try to argue that Jogo is stronger than people like Kakari, a third-year sorcerer at the Jujutsu school. Hikari was able to dodge Kashima's lightning at point blank and was stated to have infinite cursed energy. This would be, under some calcs, a sub-relativistic feat. However, that's with multiple assumptions stacked on top of each other and is pretty inconsistent. The most consistent scaling for the disaster curses is without a doubt hypersonic. Hikari having infinite curse energy may spark some discussion of him having infinite speed too. However, this is also pretty inconsistent, as while he may have infinite cursed energy, a sorcerer needs to be able to output their cursed energy too, and unless Hikari can output 100% of his cursed energy, he wouldn't be able to utilize that speed, and the disaster curses don't really scale to Hikari anyway. So then, what tools do the cursed spirits have besides their power and speed? Well, let's talk about it. Starting with Mahito, the human curse is able to perceive the soul and manipulate its shape, forcing your body to follow suit. The palm of his hand needs to be touching you in order to do this, and its effects are often lethal. Performed on himself, however, he's capable of almost entirely negating any physical damage, which does not target his soul, as the shape of his body will always conform to the shape of his soul. Even the prior mentioned Black Flash was stated to have no effect when used on him, due to it not hitting his soul. The only way to get past this technique is to either turn it off or by wearing Mahito out of cursed energy, something which Nanami Kento, Mahito's first opponent and at the time when he was far weaker, considered unrealistic, meaning Nanami thought it wasn't really a real method of defeating him. This is shown later on too, as despite Mahito using his domain expansion, something we will talk about shortly, a technique that consumes a massive amount of cursed energy barely stopped Mahito from fighting, and even after this, he went on to evolve and continue using his curse technique, only being stopped by Yuji, who used a Black Flash imbued with all of his cursed energy, Yuji himself being the only one of 3 people who can damage Mahito's soul. Dagon and Jogo are much simpler, in that Dagon can simply control water and summon Shikigami, essentially minions that fight for him, while Jogo can control fire and summon a miniature volcano at a location. The real strength of the cursed spirits are the domain expansions. This is the ultimate technique of jujutsu sorcery, and a technique that drags their opponents inside of a separate space and into a place where all of their attacks become guaranteed hits, with the attacks themselves literally not existing until they have hit you. The enemy is essentially dragged into the hearts and minds of the domain owner, and they have complete control over it. Inside Mahito's domain, he is constantly touching your soul, and as soon as the domain touches you, his technique activates. Jogo also just kind of sets you on fire or something. Who knows, we never really saw it do that, and we don't really know what it is capable of. You can escape a domain expansion, but it's considered borderline impossible even by some of the strongest in the verse. The main method of escaping a domain expansion is usually killing the caster, which is very difficult to do for obvious reasons, or by expanding your own domain expansion. It should also be noted that a domain's expansion position can be moved even after it's cast, sort of like your own summonable car expansion. The disaster curses are also spiritual entities, literally made of negative thoughts and emotions like humiliation and fear. So you can also say that these are somewhat walking ideas or concepts, but that's being debated on often, so it's up to you on if a normal person's punch could even affect them at all. Curses are also capable of easily regenerating themselves. Harumi, for instance, was able to regenerate her entire arm casually mid-fight, while Jogo was able to regenerate his entire body after a long period of time. These should be the important things to know when it comes to the disaster curses. On the lower end, they're capable of destroying towns and reaching hypersonic speeds, and on the higher end, you can argue them to be capable of destroying the planet. I'll let you decide on which to accept going forward, as I pass the video over to my friend Six and let him explain the Akatsuki side of things.
So as to not take up too much of your time, I'm going to be trying to get the Akatsuki around a general level, with the only possible exceptions for exceeding this level being Itachi, Pain, and Obito, the quote-unquote big 3 of the Akatsuki. Most of the members in this group should be at this level bare minimum, excluding the non-combative types like White Jutsu. I'm not going to bother scaling them. If anything, they would just serve as a distraction since they are utterly fodder and are really only good for diversion since they can completely mimic someone's appearance down to their chakra signature. Some may argue that people in JJK have intense sensing, so they would be able to tell the difference between Zetsu and the original people like KCM Naruto did, but Naruto was only able to do that because of the negative emotions of the Zetsu that were opposite of everyone he was trying to protect, so it made it easy. Here, even though the disaster curses can sense intent and emotion to some degree, everyone is going to have the same bad I want to kill you vibe to them. The only possible exception to this is Mahito, who can actually see the different souls of his opponents, so the Zetsu would probably not trick him. Anyway, let's get into the scaling. There is fairly simple scaling for a lot of the Akatsuki members, so we'll start off with Pain. During his fight with Six Tails Naruto, Naruto lets off an incomplete Biju bomb directly in front of Pain's face, who receives little damage, only ripping his cloak a little bit. This has a few calcs for it, but the most consistent one brings the durability feat anywhere from island to large island level, so we'll use Tendo's durability for an example, with all the other paths likely scaling below this since Tendo is implied to be the strongest. Next, we'll scale Pain's AP based off the Chibaku Tensei and Chaotic Shunner Tensei. The Chibaku Tensei, which should be Pain's strongest technique, has two different calcs for it, and so as to not make people pissed at me or Valor in the comments, I'll just say you can go with whichever one you would like to go with. If they aren't posted in the description, by the way, then you can get mad at Valor because that's him. I don't control the description. One of the calcs lists the attack at Continental in terms of AP, and the other lists the attack at country level plus. Again, not saying one of these is better than the other, interpret them how you want. Moving into speed, there are a couple things to mention here. For one, the entire Akatsuki bare minimum is going to be lightning speed, as they should all scale above a Kid Kakashi who literally cut a lightning bolt. And two, being that some of the Akatsuki, namely Itachi, has light speed jutsu such as his Tsukuyomi or Water Fang bullet. The feat of Kakashi actually reacting to the Water Fang bullet is kind of contentious, as it's sort of hard to tell whether he activated the jutsu prior to Itachi's jutsu being launched, or if he did it while it was in the middle of the jutsu being launched. Obviously, one would make him light speed and one would be a bit more ambiguous. So if you think he did legitimately react to light speed, then you could put the rest of the Akatsuki at light speed as well, considering Hidan, the self-admitted slowest member of the organization, can keep up with Kakashi in combat, and other members of the Akatsuki just outright beat Kakashi and scale above him. So to wrap up the combat speed of everyone, they're either lightning speed or light speed and above. For reaction speed, we have somewhat scattered feats. The only people with a good reaction speed feat in the Akatsuki are Obito and Itachi. Itachi, who reacts to Kirin, which is stated light speed in multiple guides, despite Zetsu's assumption of the attack speed prior to him actually seeing it, and Obito, who reacts to the Raikage and uses Kamui, which, assuming the Raikage is moving at light speed or close to it like the data book says, this would be anywhere from a relativistic or FTL feat for Obito. Getting back into AP for a second, there are two people who don't need AP scaling, that being Itachi and Obito, because Obito can literally BFR people for all eternity with his Kamui ability, and Itachi can seal the soul of anyone he pierces with his Totsuka blade. This blade is stated to not have a physical form and just be a spirit weapon, so force, which is mass times acceleration, obviously shouldn't apply to it, making it a Duraneg type of attack if he's able to land a hit with it. And we all know disaster curses have souls, as Jogo says to Dagon's burning corpse. Their souls will continue to circulate regardless of humanity's fate. I also just quickly want to mention, while I wrap up AP here, you could use the multi-continental calcs for the Biju and say Akatsuki members should scale above the Biju, as it's literally their job to hunt them down. Even if you say they do it as a two-man cell, they'd still be multi-continental due to how far into multi-continental the calc actually is. If you split the AP in half, it'd still come out to the same tier. Now, to go over some abilities briefly, Obito has Kamui, like I mentioned earlier, which allows him to enter and exit his own pocket dimension at will and bring people inside of it as well, which none of the disaster curses would have any escape. The only thing they could do is open their own pocket dimension or domain expansion as well, which wouldn't do anything. It still wouldn't bring them back to the battlefield. Obito also has fairly powerful genjutsu, being able to control multiple Biju and Jinchuriki over the course of the series. Itachi has Tsukuyomi, a powerful illusion that he can control time and space in, that is stated to be able to trap people that move at light speed in it. Itachi normally uses this jutsu to mentally break his opponents, so that's probably what he'd do here. Amaterasu is Itachi's second ability, which is fairly hot but not too hot that none of the curses can deal with it, namely Jogo, who also controls fire. Pain has a plethora of hacks like Shinra Tensei and Bansho Tenin, which are stated to deflect and pull anything, obviously only in the context of the Naruto verse. He has Shibaku Tensei, which he can use to seal the other team if he's stronger than them. He can also pull out souls, revive dead paths, and possibly other teammates with the Naraka path. Kakuzu at any given time can give the Akatsuki 4 extra teammates because of his hearts, and Hidan and Sasori are both immortal to some degree. But that's the end of the Akatsuki scaling or section, and I'll hand it back to Valor.
With all this being said, who would win? Well, the Akatsuki side of things definitely have the edge when it comes to speed and consistency. A lot of their feats and statements are shown to be pretty consistent with their portrayal, and it's definitely easier to say the Akatsuki takes the win. But does that mean the disaster curses have no way of winning? None. Like I mentioned before, if you interpret the maximum meteor to be hurting Sukuna, you can definitely say that the Akatsuki may lose from that alone, whilst you can also argue that the Akatsuki may never even be able to interact with the curses due to their nature as these evil ideas and spirits. There are other things too, like Mahito's domain killing them, or the Disaster Curse's domain expansion being able to sort of catch them off guard and ending the fight that way. There are definitely ways to argue that either side can win, so I'll let you decide who really takes the W in the end. If you enjoyed this video, consider using the domain expansion on the sub button and liking the video while you're at it. Remember to check out Six's videos too, although he's much bigger than me, literally, so I'm sure you've already seen him. You can't miss him. My name has been Valor, and I hope you have a wonderful day.